Lord Flowers, since your own graduation, you've held very posts of responsibility in a surprisingly wide variety of fields of interest. One of your most recent appointments, which you took up only last July, is that of the chairman of the Committee of Vice-Chancellors and Principals of British Universities. Could you tell us something, please, of the function of the CVCP, as it's more conveniently known, and your own function as chairman?
Well, my own function as chairman, of course, is to act like a chairman and try to give a little bit of leadership to the committee as a whole. The committee consists of, its members are the vice-chancellors and principals of all the British universities which receive their grants through the UGC, and a few others like Cranfield and the Open University which don't. And it is our function to try to provide voluntary coordination of activities in the universities, and to try to produce a coherent response from the universities to such things as changes in government policy or changes in UGC policy. And of course, in doing all this, there is a great deal of contact between ourselves and the University Grants Committee. For example, next week the UGC and a number of vice-chancellors are meeting together for the first time ever to discuss the questions which are being put by the University Grants Committee on behalf of the government to universities at the present time, the famous 28 questions.
Yes.
And we're going to have a discussion about that before anyone has made up his mind as to what the answers should be.
Does the CVCP have a purely advisory role then, or does it have any
No,
official
it's
way?
not advisory. It is a collection of its members, which are the vice-chancellors and principals of the universities.
Yes.
You can say it advises the universities if you wish.
Yes.
But it enters into discussions with the Secretary of State, with the Department of Education and Science, with industry, with commerce, with the UGC, with the health services, because we have to provide for medical education, and with all the bodies that the universities ought to be interfacing with.
Now, I believe
it's a consultative body, if you like.
Yes, thank you. I believe that recently you've been interested in possible future changes to the curricula of secondary schools and sixth form colleges. How do you see these relating to the current university system, and what changes would you like to see?
I've played no active part in that. On the other hand, I have certainly welcomed the move there has been to try to broaden the sixth form curriculum, because at the present time secondary schooling concentrates far too much, I believe, on a very narrow choice of subjects taken much too early in life, so that, for example, historians and language scholars know nothing of mathematics beyond O-level, and equally scientists know nothing whatever about the arts beyond O-level. And that seems to me to be a bad thing, and I'm glad that there is a growing opinion at last that that is a bad thing. Of course, the restriction has come to some extent from the universities, requiring very high entry standards in a very narrow range of subjects. And if we are to depart from that scheme, it follows that the universities themselves will have to change, because they will be taking people who have achieved a little less in more subjects. And that will imply something about how we treat our first year entry, and whether we can continue to produce people as bachelors at the same achievement level as we've done before at the end of the same period of time, 3 years. We may more and more have to move to 4 years, at any rate for people who are going to achieve some sort of professional kind of attainment, such as engineers and others.
Yes, so do you think that then that the universities will have to change their system before the secondary education system can be changed?
Not necessarily before, but most certainly in step with. And that is going to require a fair bit of orchestration, and it is in something like that that the CVCP can play a part by trying to coordinate and by trying to issue a bit of guidance.
Now, the 1981 government cuts in university expenditure surely have resulted in an increase of quality, a smaller number of students coming to university, and hence an increase in the quality of those due to fierce competition. Do you think this is generally good or bad?
Well, that is a difficult question. I think it is good that there has been a distinct increase in quality as measured not only by A-level results but by attitudes towards a rather professional kind of education, which you know very well we try to give here. The rise in quality there, to us, has undoubtedly been helpful. But it is a different question whether you say that people who are not suitable for a place like Imperial College should not nevertheless go to university somewhere. And I think it is a great pity that opportunity for entry into university is about 1 in 7 less now than it would have been about 3 years ago,
Yes.
as a result of these cuts.
You obtained your MA degree, of course, from Cambridge. Do your current views that you've just been talking about as to secondary education, do they develop from your own experience of education, or have you come to these views
That
since
was such
then?
a long time ago, I hardly remember. Although I was very grateful for the efforts of the schools I went to, who served me very well, I must say. But I did not at that stage have views about education policy.
After graduating, I believe you moved into nuclear physics for quite some time, and you were at the Atomic Energy Research Establishment for several years. Was this your own specialist field at that time then?
Yes, when I was at Cambridge, when I approached my final year, I got more and more interested in nuclear physics, which at that time was right at the beginning of trying to reach an understanding about the nature of the atomic nucleus and all that. It was a very exciting subject. It was developing fast in the same sort of way as molecular biology has been doing over the last few years. It's taken the place, if you like. And it was natural then, it was towards the end of the war, to go into the atomic energy business, as it was called. I went first to Canada and then came back and went to Harwell, Atomic Energy Research Establishment, where I spent, I think, altogether about 14 years. And I've remained very closely associated, although not entirely in agreement always, with the nuclear power industry ever since. And I still am quite close to many of the people there and have many, many discussions with them. And I have had 10 years as a member of the Atomic Energy Authority board itself, although I'm not any more so.
Well, you mentioned molecular biology there. Recent years have seen the setting up of various companies at Imperial College, such as Imperial Biotechnology and Imperial Software. Presumably you approve of the organisation of these companies. Would you like to see any more such ventures at Imperial College?
Well, I approve of them, certainly, because they enable members of the academic staff and technicians too sometimes to take part in activities of a commercial kind which they otherwise wouldn't be able to, and yet not in conflict with their academic duties. And this can be extremely beneficial for the development of these new technologies and also beneficial for the college in the long run. And yes, therefore, I do in principle approve of the idea of more such companies being launched, but it must be done with care, because we are feeling our way into a new world, the commercial world, which we're not expert in. And it takes a little time, and we could get into difficult situations if we didn't do it with great care. So there's no question of our rushing in to create 100 firms or anything of that sort. We shall create one a year or something of that kind, and shall learn from our own experience.
Obviously there's sufficient industrial financial support for this sort of company. The industry is interested in investing capital in these joint ventures.
Industry, all of these activities are done jointly with industrial firms who might wish to take up the products or take up the research results, and with venture capitalists, that's to say sources of funds in the city, which also wish to see the development of these things and believe that there is a profit to be made by sharing in the expense of it. We also, of course, have a share in the capital of the firm, and will earn from that eventually by increasing capital value if the company is successful, and of course by profits.
How would these companies affect the undergraduate and postgraduate population of the college? Will they affect it in any way at all?
Well, undergraduates directly, not at all. Indirectly, yes, because, well, I must even correct that. Some undergraduates, in the case of Imperial Software Technology, will certainly do part of their industrial training as part of the course in IST itself. But mostly these companies will not affect undergraduate life. They will increasingly, I believe, I hope, affect postgraduate life, because we see the research activities of these little companies as being conducted jointly with the research activities of the departments with which they're associated. And I hope that there will be a lot of toing and froing of staff, but also of postgraduate students.
Yes. So this could be some useful training in industrial
Yes, that's
experience
right.
for
Precisely.
postgraduate students.
Precisely.
Do you feel then that at the moment there's a little bit too much perhaps of an ivory tower attitude in some ways, even now, at the postgraduate level?
Yes, I think there is. No, not in all cases at all, because many departments are nowadays bringing up their PhD students with problems that are derived directly from industrial need, and very often with industrial money put into the research project, and with a certain measure of industrial supervision or at any rate collaboration. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm not aware of that. But I think this is another way of furthering that process and furthering a realization that on both sides that research is important to the industrial process.
Yes. What do you think about the status of engineers and scientists in this country as opposed to, say, the USA, where you were a visiting professor at MIT in the 1950s? Is there a large difference there?
Well, I wasn't a visiting professor from industry
Yes.
at MIT,
I beg your pardon.
so that was rather different. Yes, in some countries, the United States is one. Germany is the outstanding example. Many industrialists are visiting professors and actually do play a part in the affairs of the university, teach a bit, conduct research a bit, and give guidance quite a lot. This is beginning to happen in this country increasingly. And at the moment at Imperial College we have, I think, about 40 or something like that visiting professors, of whom I suppose 25 or thereabouts are from industry or from commerce. And many of them are helping us in all sorts of ways to bring research interests in, to give us guidance about how to change the syllabus in order that it may better fit engineers especially, but not only, scientists as well, for an industrial future and so on.
Yes.
It's a very important thing that we bring people into our own society and enable external influences to bear upon us directly in that way.
Yes, talking of that, you've served on various commissions, I believe, that concern the environment, environmental pollution and the like. How do you feel that scientists and engineers should relate themselves to these questions? Do you feel that they concern themselves with it to a sufficient extent at the moment, or perhaps not?
On the whole, no, I don't think they do, but they are doing so more and more. I think the days are over when a scientist or an engineer would simply conduct his project, whatever it is, without any thought at all to the consequences, to the cost of putting his discoveries into effect in production or something, or to the possible harmful effects that misuse of his discoveries might lead to. More and more we are encouraging people to think more broadly. And one of the very important things we have to do, if a new industrial process is involved, for example, is to think about how that will affect the economics of the firm that might adopt it. It will cost a lot of money to adopt it. Can it afford it, or will it go bust as a result, or will it make greater profits? Will it harm the prospects of the workforce by throwing a lot of people out of work in a way that can't be made up for somehow? Will it damage the environment? So we are thinking, and we are encouraging our students to think about these broader aspects of their work.
So do you think that the past record of British industry in this respect has been good, bad, or about average?
I think it's been much better than average in many respects. This country was, without question, in the lead in trying to control air pollution, for example. We started long before most people, with the result that our air pollution problems are very much less than they are in the United States, in Germany, especially in Japan. So no, I wouldn't slate British industry at all in that respect.
Well, finally then, let me ask you what short-term changes you could see at IC, particularly in view of your chairmanship of CVCP. Will that have any effect on Imperial College at all, directly?
I try to keep the hats I wear separate and don't let the CVCP and Imperial College intrude too much upon each other. I think Imperial College is set on a very definite course of trying to provide rather professionally oriented education in science and engineering in a broad way to the best students it can get. And of course we do have very high quality students at Imperial College. Bearing in mind also the fact that we have always, and I hope always will, take students from overseas countries as well and treat them exactly the same. That's our objective, and we're trying to do that better and better all the time. And I don't think anything that is being discussed in CVCP circles will affect that. Of course, it may affect in detail how we go about it. If we decided that the universities were to take students who hadn't all got at least 3 Bs at A level, but had a broader base, as we were talking about at the beginning of this interview, broader base from school,
Yes.
then we would have to do something about our first year, for example, to accommodate students of less achievement, not ability, but less achievement in a given subject. So there will be implications, of course, but no implication, I think, that will affect the essential purposes of Imperial College, which I think are right and should continue.
Right. Thank you very much, Lord Flehouse, for spending this sort of time to come in and talk to us today. And it only remains then for me to wish you, I'm sure on behalf of all Imperial College students, yet further success in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.